We're live. I'm late, but I'm here. 7:26. Tonight we're going to talk about crate motors. Well, not just crate motors, but some of my favorite test motors. I was looking at the L33 that I have, the aluminum motor that I got from the wrecking yard, and it's fantastic. Obviously, I've already had to fix the some of the threads for the cam retaining plate, but still, I like it. But honestly, even with all of the grief that I've had with the little 4.8, I also like that one. What I like are motors that actually are alive and running. So I can say that about the 2.2 liter Dodge as well. I don't like motors that are sitting in my shop that are all apart with the heads off or head off in the case of the Slant 6 or the 4200. I like them when they're together and they're working. But a couple of notable favorites for ones that I've had is the one that I have in the thumbnail, which is a 2003, 2004. They had those for 2 years. The Terminator, the supercharged 0304 Cobra motor, and it was fantastic. I mean, it was supplied by the guys from Ford Racing way back in the day. So thank you to those guys for way back in the day. I'm sure the people that were involved in that are no longer there. I seem to outlast all of those people that are working in special projects and things, and then all of a sudden they go by and are doing something else, and then I have to work with somebody new. But way back, they supplied one of these motors, and I used it to write my book on modular Ford performance. We used it for a lot of testing, lots of 4-valve stuff, because even though it was a low compression version that had the supercharger on it from the factory, it was still a good 4-valve motor to do lots of testing with. Now, it would have been better if it was 10-to-1, a naturally aspirated version, because we would have been able to do more things with it. It would have been cool. But as it was, we ran camshafts on it and ported heads and obviously all kinds of superchargers. We ran turbos on it. We did lots of nitrous on it, nitrous and a blower, and not just nitrous and the Eaton blower, also nitrous and a centrifugal blower. That motor is the one that I did the testing on, that I'm surprised that everybody hasn't just overwhelmed that video. I'm actually quite surprised about it, because this was always a point of contention with people, and that they wanted to see, because the question is, there's lots of forms of force induction, but which one is the best? So, obviously we have to define the word best. It's like defining the word thoughts. But I would have thought that would answer a lot of questions for people. So I took that motor and we ran the factory Eaton supercharger, which albeit is a little bit limited in the power level that we were running it at, but we ran it at 7 pounds and then tried to run it at either 11 or 14. I think we ran 11 and 14 pounds. It's not good for 14 pounds on that motor, on that modified motor, because we had cams in it too. And that supercharger just won't support that level. But we also ran a Kenny Bell on it. We ran a Vortec or Paxton on it, centrifugal. And then we also ran 2 turbos from the guys, from my buddy Jimmy and Nathan, who ran HP Performance. So we ran all the different forms of force induction. We ran with the same air fuel, the same timing, and the same boost levels. And to demonstrate, not so much, although people want that, all the turbo guys want to show that there's superiority and we're the baddest of the bunch. What I wanted to do was really show the difference in the power curves offered by all of these. And that maybe, even of all the testing that I did with the 03 Cobra stuff, was probably my favorite. So it took a lot to get it done, because we ran a lot of different boost levels, lots of tests to get everything working. And then while it was on, I also did other things, like for instance, when we ran the centrifugal supercharger, I ran it with the way that they had supplied it with the supercharger. We ran it with the inlet manifold that they supplied, because what they wanted was something that just bolted on top of the factory lower manifold that included the intercooler and the air-to-water intercooler that they ran on the 03 Cobra with the Eaton supercharger. So they wanted to maintain that with the Vortec. Problem is that it eliminated all the rudder length, which is not good. And so you just have a more efficient supercharger, a bigger supercharger in the form of the Vortec or the Paxton. And so it can make a lot more power than the Eaton, but it doesn't show itself until the top of the RPM range, because that's when it starts having impeller speed. That's when it starts making boost, as much or more boost than the Eaton supercharger did. If we pulley it to make the same boost, then it becomes more efficient. But below that, it's making quite a bit less. And so it's not a good combination. What is a good combination is to get rid of that, get rid of the intercooler, and then put the 2001 long runner Cobra intake manifold on there, and then we gain a lot more average power production because of the long runner length, and then put a different kind of intercooler in there so that they're both intercooled. I did that test, but I didn't have the intercooler, and then we ended up adding an intercooler to it, and to show what all of that does. And intercooler or not intercooler is a good test. That manifold, just a common plenum basically, versus the long runner test is a good one. We also use NITROUS as an intercooler. You know, not a good intercooler. NITROUS isn't, believe it or not, even though it's very, very cold, it just doesn't change the charge temperature very much. It's just not enough of it. There's 900 horsepower worth of hot air, and there's 100 horsepower or 150 horsepower worth of the cold stuff. So it's just not as, it doesn't change the charge temperature dramatically as much as you'd want to. It does, however, change the power dramatically, which adding NITROUS to anything does that, and it certainly does that to the supercharged combination. But the O3 Cobra, we ran the stock O3 Cobra camshafts. We optimized those cams by making sure that both sides of the motor had the same cam timing, which they didn't from the factory. So we were able to adjust those. Thanks long ago to John Hovitz from AccuFab for pointing that out in all of his modular motor craziness, drag racing stuff that he did. He's like, they're not the same. You need to check them. He said they can be. A lot of times they're not. And so we checked them and they weren't, and we adjusted them, and it was definitely worth power. We also did that on 2-valve, and it was definitely worth power when they're the same and one of them is not skewed one way or the other. On the 04 Cobra, we also ran the NOS nozzles. So the basically individual ports, they're little inserts that go between the injector and the manifold, and they inject fuel and nitrous the same way that a direct fogger system does, and that worked good. We ran the nitrous with the Eaton supercharger, did the usual upgrades on the Eaton supercharger, you know, bigger crank pulleys, smaller blower pulleys, tensioners, and bigger inlet, the AccuFab elbow and throttle body on that. We did headers on it. I did put cams in it. We put the small 262 cams in it, the XE262AH cams, smallest of the comp offerings, and those picked up quite a bit of power. I think we went from like 375 to 425, so they're about 50 horsepower. So it was a good cam upgrade. They did trade a little bit of power down low, which we kind of expected. And interestingly enough, those cams, we ran it NA because we ran it as a low compression NA motor to find out what it did. I think I probably was the first one to ever do that. Nobody would have taken that off and put a regular intake manifold on there and run it NA just to see what it did, because it's a low compression 4-valve motor and nobody would have wanted that. But I wanted that because I wanted to know what our starting point was. If we don't know what the starting point is, how do we know how well the blower and all that stuff is working? So we put the 01 Cobra intake manifold on it, ran it NA with the stock cams, ran it NA with the comp cams, and then ran it under boost, the various things. And lo and behold, those camshafts worked NA. They worked with a supercharger, a centrifugal supercharger, worked with a root supercharger, they worked with a twin screw supercharger, and not surprisingly, they worked with twin turbos, not just a single turbo. They worked with all of those, and we know why, because we know cams are cams, and we know what they're going to do. If they work NA, they're just going to get multiplied when we add boost to it, and they're going to do that the way that all of these things make boost. So I thought that was a really interesting test. I was very excited about that one. Other crate motors that I've had that have worked very well, the guys from GM, the guys from GANDRUD Chevrolet specifically, thank you guys to the guys at GANDRUD Chevrolet. You guys are awesome. An LS2 crate motor, which I used a ton of, and then also an LS3 crate motor, which I think I probably used even more of the LS3 crate motor. We ran a turbo on it. In fact, I ran an MSD wireless, you know, kind of a standalone deal that does closed loop at 7 pounds of boost. I was mortified to even try it, but I did it and it worked okay. I don't think they even sell that anymore, but we did that test. I ran boost on other things, other combinations, bigger turbos and stuff. Because I think I ran a little 76 millimeter turbo from CX Racing on that one, a single. And then we ran bigger turbos on it. I mean, this thing with a good camshaft in it and springs in it, and then boost. I mean, this thing was an easy 800 horsepower or 800 plus horsepower, even at very, very low boost. So the LS3 was very impressive. It got umpteen different camshafts in it, ranging from the stock one all the way up to kind of the biggest one that would fit. We tried a variety of different intake manifolds. The video is up on the intake manifold stuff on the LS3. You know, headers and a few different, actually a few different cylinder heads and stuff too, because we were comparing the rec port heads versus a lot of the others. Same thing with the LS2, and on the LS3 we also ran nitrous and blowers and all that stuff. And same thing with the LS2. Before the LS3, the cathedral port version basically of an LS3, 400 horsepower. It had flat top piston, so it had compression. It had the 799 or 243 heads on it. It had an LS2 intake, which was not great, and we ran a bunch of intakes through it, including back then the fast. We ran ported versions of those heads thanks to Trick Flow and Total Engine Airflow back when Brian was doing this. Was way back. Obviously headers and nitrous and blowers and turbo. We ran Vortex stuff on it and all kinds of things. So all of those worked very well. And then the last one I'll mention tonight is the one from the guys from Blueprint Engine, who have supplied some stuff to the guys at West Tech and Engine Masters, but they supplied me a 540 big block power adder crate motor, which I did a ton of videos for, and obviously I'm still mentioning it now. So they're still getting a tremendous amount of PR for that thing. But like the others, in fact, before they had put this together, they had asked me what my recommendation of cams was, and I told them the one that I like, that I've run, that I've had good success with, is that BR300. And so they put a cam like that in that 540. And again, like we have before in the past with lots of other 468, I don't think I've run that cam on a 468, but lots of them in 489s and 496s and bigger motors, and in this 540 and in other 540s too, in the dark 540 that I have. That's the other one that definitely gets honorable mention, but it was just a short block. It was a Dart SHP 540 short block, low compression, that made a ton of power. We eventually put blowers and all kinds of things on that one too. But on the Blueprint one, we ran it with NA. We ran it with a few different intake manifolds and carburetors and headers and things like that. We ran it with nitrous. We ran it with the 671 Roots blower from the blower shop. Thank you guys to the blower shop. They do awesome stuff over there. We ran a centrifugal blower, Pro Charger. The Pro Charger guys do great stuff. The thing made a ton of power. And then we also ran it with twin turbos. I think two of the S475s like we use on the Big Bang deal. So we ran those, and you know, all of that worked fantastic, and with the same camshaft. Lo and behold, it works with all of those things and works very well. So those are all good, and it was cool of those guys to supply that stuff way back, and we did a lot of testing with it, and all of that worked out really good. And they all got, obviously they got lots of press and publicity for it, and so I'm sure that they're very happy with the way that all of that stuff turned out. So I'll scroll back and we'll see what you guys have going on. We've got to get a poll going. So the question is, have you ever run two different turbos on your motor? And by that, I don't mean have you run twin turbos and one of them is bigger than the other one. I get asked that question all the time. Hey, can I run different size turbos and then the little one will spool better than the big one? We need to have a conversation about that. That needs to be a topic of conversation for one of these live feeds, and I'll tell you why that doesn't work, or why it might not work. This is more, have you run a turbo on something and then decided, hey, I need to upgrade my turbo to something bigger, or you put something bigger on and decided, hey, I need to downgrade my turbo because I want more response, so I put a smaller one on. So have you ever changed the turbo on your combination, either went bigger or smaller, to try to adjust and make it better for the thing that you needed it to be better for? So we'll see how everyone's doing. Special Agent, Snow Barrel, Uncle's here. Charles is here. Mike, Kevin, Burns. Howdy to everybody. 4.6 rate motor. The 03 Cobra motor is, I think, one of my favorite of the modular Ford families. I mean, the Coyote's really impressive, but I think of that as a different different generation of modular Fords. Have a soft spot for the 3800, Series 2 and Series 3. Both of them are good. Always thought supercharged was the best, but I definitely want to turbo everything now. They all are good. MMR makes an adapter plate to fit Coyote intakes on a 5.4 32 valve. I've seen that. None of that was available when I did all of the intakes that I ran on the different motors. We need to see a 5.4 4-valve and test intake manifolds. I have those videos up for all the older intake manifolds. I don't have Coyote adapter ones there. I haven't done that because the Coyote wasn't out when I did those tests. Will ever get an all-out 305 build on the channel? So for me, all-out is way more expensive than I can afford, because an all-out 305 would be that for some reason you're limited on that bore size. I don't know why you would be, but all out would be a canted valve head and high compression and a roller cam and a dry sump setup and all of that stuff. That's what all out to me means. Does it mean something different to you? Because that's a $25,000 or $30,000 motor. Sean, checking in from sick week, currently at SGMP and on the way to Gainesville now. Changed out an axle in less than 2 hours. Nice. Did you break the axle? Is that what happened? I think spacers and adapters can make the short runner Coyote blower manifolds much better. What is a blower manifold? Ever think of testing Vinci cams? I don't think I've ever seen any of those. Yeah, I saw a post from Cletus that they hurt something, but he said they hurt it when they were just driving and it didn't blow up like during the run. The 60s here in Kentucky. It was nice here today. It was windy this morning, but the L8T 6.6s are going cheap on eBay, 3,500. That's a lot more than 350 that you get for an LS. I'd like to find a used GM Performance Vortec TPI lower intake for my Cadillac Fleetwood. Is your 93 a Vortec motor? I didn't think a 93 throttle body 350 was a Vortec headed one, is it? I'm scrolling back. The screen hasn't frozen. I'm just looking. I'm just trying to scroll back to see where it was. Every time I click on it, it like races down. It wants to go all the way to the bottom. Option 3, never ran a turbo. Okay. I want to put a tune port with a Vortec motor. Yeah, if you have a Vortec motor, Scoggen-Dickey makes that Vortec TPI lower, and then you could put all the rest of the tune port stuff on it. Or you could modify one like we did to put on that L99 motor. Mexico City, in the house. I feel like if you ran two different turbos as twins, you'd have to either do them as compounds or you'd have to equalize exhaust side pre-turbo. You'd have to equalize the discharge side is really the problem. You get one that wants to flow out of the other one. Have you ever tested a stock LA 318 with a 2-barrel? I have not. I've never run a 318 of any kind, not a LA or a Magnum, although I want to. But I want to finish the Magnum 360 first. Jay, I had a turbo rated at 400 horsepower on my 4-liter Cherokee and went to a 600 horsepower rated one. Good. What's your favorite engine? I don't have a favorite one. I like them all. Big Belly Racing, he has worked with Dulcich, so I'm going to go, yeah. I don't know what that was in response to. Favorite engine series you've done is a 3800. I'd like to do more with that. I want to do that Big Bang. Just did a turbo swap on my twin turbo 54 Cadillac. Nice. Put together John, hey Richard, I put together a Gen 3 6-liter with 862 heads and a Tick Stage 3 cam. Any idea what we might be making for power? I don't know what the specs are on that cam. It's an interesting combination that you'd put that much camshaft in it with that cylinder head. Most of the times guys go the 6-liter and put those heads on it and then put a small cam on it so that they can get lots of torque. My first 200 Ford that I wedged into the you had a 200 inline 6-cylinder in a Chevette. 5 different turbo combinations, nice. Like the HX35 on my 2.3-liter Ford, the stock turbo is nice for low end, and the GT45 is just too big and lags forever. The HX35 is a good middle ground. I agree, yeah, that's probably the case, and I think we'll see a lot of that on the 2.2. What I'm curious about when we run the 2.2 is I'm curious to see what happens when we go to a bigger turbo, like how much laggier it is, if laggier is actually a word. And then what happens when we make the 2.5, and then how much less laggier the turbo, that same turbo is with the bigger displacement. Because as we know, anything that we do to add low speed power will improve boost response. Let's see an L8T and port injection. Talking about the super short runner or non-existent runner manifolds they use for PD blowers. That extra half-inch or inch of runner length may work wonders. A half-inch or an inch is not going to make the difference. It needs another 6 or 8 inches is what it needs. I have 2 TPI setups, both on the 95 blocks. Cool. TBI is all swirl port, low flow heads. That's what I thought. I thought that I didn't think that they had the, although I thought that some of the Vortex stuff was also TBI. Salvador, I didn't see your message. Put a larger turbo on the Cruise. Anybody report a set of TBI heads? Never driven a car with a non-factory turbo. My semi-truck uses 2 different turbo sizes, one for low RPM, one for high. Yeah, compounds on a turbo diesel, very good. I'm doing a compound TPI setup in my Suburban. You're doing compound turbos with a tune port setup? I thought Magnum had a 308. That's right, he does. Check valves and turbo, on your opinion, would they present too much restriction on dual turbos? Well, you wouldn't really have check valves. the way that they do, if you look at the way they do sequential turbos, they have valves that just reroute the discharge side, and on the hot side. It's really complicated plumbing to make sequential turbos work. And that would be a better way to do it rather than twin parallel turbos, where one's bigger than the other. We know because we've tried that, and one of them backfeeds the other one. '96 was the first year for Vortec heads. In '96, what was the intake? What did the intake look like on the Vortec headed combination? How could someone contact you? You can use my email that I give all the time and ask me a question, or you can ask a question here if you want my opinion. What was your question, Bill? Did you already ask it? I didn't see it if you did. Was talking about a camshaft lamp. We were talking about that earlier from this camshaft that's laying on the ground. We have an international with a cat and compound turbos. Seems to have issues all the time. Machine shop thought the 3800 was internally balanced. Is it now internally balanced? Did they go and rebalance everything and add a bunch of metal to it? Vortex stock intake, the base is very similar to Crossfire intake base. Oh, cool. 96 is the weird plastic with the pop-up valves for the spider assembly. Is that what it was? What is the best way to learn tuning basics? If you go online, there's lots of stuff available for guys to teach you about tuning. Holly has courses. The Ben over at EFI University has stuff that you can take. Growth. Richard, I have a small but Chevy 350 Edelbrock carburetor. What is the most budget way to rebuild and upgrade the carburetor? Where do you suggest sending the carb to for a rebuild? What upgrade parts do you recommend? I don't know what Edelbrock carb you have. And I don't know if rebuilding one is going to be a much better deal than, unless you know somebody that can do it. I don't know if it's going to be a much better deal sending it off somewhere to get it rebuilt as opposed to just buying one. I mean, if I was going to replace it, you should look at the Brawler carburetors are pretty inexpensive. Richard, have you seen the new Turbo 6 where they cast the hot side of the turbo into the cylinder head? Yeah, that's pretty common now. If you look at a J series Honda, the heads are like that, and a lot of the Volkswagen stuff is like that. I jacked my Crossfire setup on the 83 Z28. It was such a pain. I remember right, there was only one aftermarket Crossfire intake and people didn't like them. Have you seen the Performance Design XSLS intake manifold? Yeah, I posted stuff on social media about that because I had a meeting with them. I'm going to be testing one coming up because I know what a tough deal it would be to make something that's better than the factory LS3 intake manifold. That's no easy task, and I complimented them on both on their tenacity on their decision to actually try to do it, because they know their guys are from K-Tech, so they know what induction theory is. They're really good at it, but they also know how big the hill was that was in front of them to make something that was better than the factory LS3 intake manifold, because they had done intakes for other people and they knew what it was. And I said, look, I salute you for looking at that hill and going, you know what, we're going to climb that. And even said, well, you're the only guy here that's recognized that. And he said, but we maybe didn't realize how steep it was. He said, as we got up about halfway, we're like, this is a lot. And again, I salute them, performance design guys, because they kept at it and made something that actually makes more power. If what I mean, I'm sure that it is, because these guys are really good. So I can't wait to test it, because it looks very, very cool, and it looks like it's going to do what they say that it does, which would be awesome. But the question is, how will it work under boost? The rattling noise is PC doing a two-step. It shouldn't be doing that, because my other mic should be on now. It shouldn't be that's normally the camera. Man, it's Topos de Diablo. That was a lot of fun. You can get a tune kit. I don't think he's talking about a tune kit. He's talking about rebuilding the carburetor, Casey. Am I insane going through all the trouble of tuning the entire engine NA before I put a turbo on it? No, I like to do that. I do that every time, but I don't just put it. I don't ever just put a motor that has a turbo on it and run it with a turbo. The only time I would ever do that is if the motor had already been run NA. And I like to do it that way so that I have the NA tune, and then like if it's a brand new motor that I've never done before, I have an NA tune, and then all I have to do basically is just double the top value if it's a 2-bar map sensor, and then interpolate everything, and I add about 5 or 10% or whatever to that, because we're going to need more fuel, even though we're going to need more than twice the amount of fuel because we're running it richer. But because we're going to double the power, you double the fuel flow, and then you double the fuel flow and then some, because it takes more fuel, because we're going to run it at 11.5 instead of 12.5 to 1, let's say. So that's what I do, and it's a good starting point. And then we can do loads, and at 7 pounds or whatever, we take all the timing out of it. We do loads, and then we start adjusting it and go, oh look, it's close, it's happy, it's whatever. I like doing it that way, because also, if it's a new motor, it gives us a chance to break in the NA motor. Even if it's not, it gives us a chance to make sure that there's no problems with the NA motor before we add boost. If you just put a turbo thing up there and you're having problems with it, then you're scratching your head going, well, is it problematic because it's the turbo? Is it problematic because it has a broken spring, or it has a camshaft that's going bad, or something that's related to the motor? Is it a tune issue? Do I have a spark plug going bad? What is the thing? And if you get it and it's working NA, more times than not, when you put the turbo on there, then it's all going to work well. Supercharge Explorer 302 AFR heads, or choose a 347 363. I keep it affordable, but I can't decide. Well, the 347 363, I would pick the 363. I've run a 347 Dart short block, an SHP short block, worked fantastic. The 363 even better, because it's a bigger bore. But the cheap route is to get a junkyard Explorer motor and then put a cam and springs in it. Wait, the fast LS6R 102 doesn't make more power everywhere over the stock LS3? No. I hear the rattling as well. Does Bank still do super turbo compounding on his diesel project? He did way back. That was quite a while ago, though. Just accept the rattle as part of Richard's setup. I don't know what would be rattling. It shouldn't be doing it. Talk about having 10-to-1 compression for your base motor before adding boost, more responsive and efficient. Yet on my EJ 255 Subaru, you're leery of going above 8.3. I don't remember telling you that on a Subaru, because I don't have any Subaru experience, but I would be more leery of doing it on a Subaru, because I don't think you have the head gasket sealing on a Subaru, as well as other motors that have 10-to-1. Some engines can handle lots of compression with boost. Some engines run Subaru head gasket. See, Admiral's with me here. The rattle's gone now. Are you sure it's not the frogs in the background? Does anyone have experience with early GM Performance LSX blocks. I've run a few of those. Ran across a post recently saying they're prone to failure. But they didn't say why. Was the Dart Sharp block the one that's in your card? That is one of them, Matt. Yours is a 347, right? Towing with turbos on gasoline. I know in diesel they have to watch EGTs. Is it the same on gas? No, it's not going to be the same as it is in a diesel. EGTs wouldn't be a bad thing to have. I would much rather have air fuel. Richard, that was exactly my plan for the G10 turbo. 36 pounds of boost is a lot. I believe that Inland Empire was involved with ProCharger compounding 7.3 and 6.0 Power Stroke projects. Why would you choose a ProCharger to compound a supercharger and a turbo on a diesel like that? I don't understand why they would do that. I mean, having a centrifugal supercharger and a turbo seems to me to be a big waste of time. '77 GMC C30 truck with a Volvo 5.7 had a Rochester Quadrajet. I put a 650 Edelbrock on it. Now it doesn't have the power. Well, your Quadrajet was bigger than that, but if the motor's stock, it shouldn't need anything more than a 650. My guess is that it's not, that the air fuel is off now. I would put the Quadrajet back on and see if the power comes back, and then I would just leave the Quadrajet on there. I would pick a Rochester over that particular Edelbrock anyways. The new Edelbrock carburetors, the new performance ones, are really good. In-head piston fly cutter is on the way. 2-inch 202 valve, 560 lift, 227 at 50, needs a trim. There you go. Jaybird, happy to help, man. 351 Windsor 79 block and stock style dish pistons. So you're putting valve notches in it. Richard, was the best head for a 6-liter Vortec for torque, mid-band power? You should get rid of, if you have a 6-liter LS, you should get rid of the 317 head and put a 799 or an 862 706 head on there. And then you'll want a different cam than stock too. Long tube headers are a good idea. When I bought the truck, the guy took the Quadrajet. It also has a small cam. I think the theory on ProCharge and turbo is for instant torque and turbo on the top end. Well, but that's not going to happen. A ProCharger doesn't have instant torque. A ProCharger has a rising boost curve that's very, very low at low speeds and then high at high speeds. So the one that would give you instant torque would be a positive displacement blower, and that would be the way to go for compound. And that's what most people do for compound stuff if you're running a blower and a turbo. So have you ever run 2 different turbos on your motor? Only 16% are turbo switchy guys. Turbo switchy. It's patent pending. I'm going to go to live chat now, since I'm down at the bottom. 799 or 862, either one of those will work. You're not going to be able to discern the difference between those two on your motor. Banks is working on a Whipple charger and a turbocharged diesel for Pikes Peak. That would make sense to have more low-speed power, having a Whipple twin-screw positive displacement blower with a turbo. I don't know. I mean, I guess that they would use those on diesel stuff. I just haven't done a lot of diesel performance stuff other than turning the boost up and adding more fuel to them. What's y'all's favorite turbo manufacturer? I don't choose turbos by manufacturer. I ran a bigger turbo on my MR2. Was it originally a turbo, the turbo 2-liter MR2, or was it the earlier supercharged one, or the earlier 1.6 NA one? Was it an NA 2-liter? Although, was the NA motor bigger? Was it a 2.2 on the MR2s? I can't remember. I thought that one of them was bigger than the other. Maybe they were both 2 liters. VS Racing has lots of good stuff. Borg Warner has good stuff. Precision has good stuff. I mean, there's lots of good turbos out there. Do you have any AMC V8 videos? I don't. I haven't run an AMC motor on the engine dyno. Don't think I've run one on a chassis dyno either. Although the gentleman that I in the video that took me for a ride in the carbureted, I think he had a carbureted 2J in his, it's like it was an Ambassador or something. He had the motor that came out of that. It was the little 6-cylinder with a transmission just sitting off to the side. An AMX, yeah, not a Javelin, but an AMX would be good, yeah. Ever worked with one of those eBay LS wire harnesses? I haven't, but I've actually heard good things about them. Get away, Ben. Go get some sleep. We are finally sleeping. The puppies now are not staying up and going to the bathroom every hour on the hour. They're actually sleeping through the night, which is very, very good and makes us want to keep them. AMC Rebel machine. Yep, that's good. I do like the AMX. I like Gremlins. I also like Pacers. I'm actually not nearly as big a fan as of a Javelin, though. The AMX I like because it's short and squatty, scrunchy. But the Javelin I don't like as much. Really, no one else wants Chromod turbos. I don't. That's out of my price range and not out of my power range. VS and On3. I've run lots of VS turbos. I've never run an On3 one. So some of the other guys might be able to answer this. I don't know what the flow rate is on the return side of a stock fuel regulator. So he's got a stock 5.3 Tahoe. It needs a fuel pump. I want a turbo eventually. Going to put a high flow 600 horsepower pump in now without an aftermarket fuel regulator. I think you can put a 342 or 400 or something in there. And I think that the stock regulator probably would put up with that. Let's see if I can make this stop. I'm trying to make it stop, but it's not stopping. Shows the puppies. The puppies are probably downstairs sleeping. My buddy's dog is having her puppies right now. Good. Good luck to mom and to the little ones. Any experience to make an AMC 390 faster? I know that now they have ported heads for them, and it's the same thing as everything else. Ported heads, cam, intake manifold, carburetor. If it's a carburetor, hopefully, I mean, it's not hopefully, it can be a carburetor or can be EFI. Long tube headers, all of that stuff works on AMC just like it does everything else. 73 Gremlin X, nice. Show me the puppies. Something I say to Lisa all the time. Let's see. Good to hear. Sadly, work tonight. Oh, you'll pull through. There you go. The Whipple does seem like a more appropriate choice for compounding diesels over Prochargers. It is. I mean, like we have compound stuff up on the channel where we ran the little M90 with a turbo on the 3800, and then also I did it with Jimmy from HP. They did it back in the day with twin turbos feeding the what is it, M112 on an 03 Cobra, and that works good because he ran it with just the intake manifold. So he did lots of good data on that. And having the supercharger there obviously improves the spool rate of the turbos, because now you have instead of a 300 horsepower motor, you have a 450 horsepower motor trying to spool the turbos up, and obviously the spool rate is much improved like that. It did stop when I hit the desk. I don't know what the heck that is then. Snow Barrel, you can go to Wallace Racing and it will tell you exactly how much that is. You can go to Wallace Racing compression calculator, and you can put in your chamber volume, and you can play around with that all that you want. Most people mill about 30 from it. Whipple is actually not good for compounding. Are you talking about it as Gale Banks proved? Traditional roots pattern compressors work so much better for compounding because they work better with just a simple pressure difference. I don't understand that. I don't understand why you would think that a screw blower isn't going to work as a compound setup. I know that the screw blower has internal compression, which is what makes it more efficient than a roots blower, whereas a roots blower doesn't, because a roots blower is just an air mover. It just grabs air from one side and moves it to the other. Twin screw actually compresses it internally, so you have boost created inside. But I don't know why feeding a twin screw blower with boost from the turbo is not going to improve. I know that's going to improve the flow rate of the blower quite a bit. What would be the easiest way to reach 300 horsepower with a stock F250 flat tap at EFI? You're going to need a camshaft, because that motor's probably going to be around, the way that we run it, it's going to be around 250. So you're going to need a camshaft, and probably either, like, I would put the GT40 heads from the Explorer on there. So a camshaft and springs and those heads. I don't know how limiting that stock intake manifold is going to be, but that should get you to 300. My favorite hot rod was the Thing. A lot of guys hot rodding those, were there? Israel, you're watching from Mexico. There's another gentleman here from Mexico City. Salvador said, I ran a Walboro 450 on the stock 3800 regulator and didn't have overpressure limits. Okay. 5.3 LS to a 6-liter with a 7875 VS this year. Should I upgrade the turbo for the 6-liter? 5.3 is already reasonably responsive. It will, Rob, your turbo need is going to depend on how much power you want to make. So 7875 is, if it's the original Gen 1 deal, that's going to be 900 horsepower or something if you want to make that much power. If you only want to make that much power, you can keep that turbo on there. If you want to make more than that, then you step up in turbo size, which you can because you've gone to a bigger motor. Short fuse, again, I'm going to steer you to Wallace Racing compression calculator. You'll go to TrickFlow, find out what the chamber size, well, you have your chamber size on the 56cc combustion chamber. Go to Wallace Racing, plug all your information in, plug in your 56cc chamber head, and you'll have your compression. You can also, if you can find out what the combustion chamber size is, we could do a rough calculation. If you can find out what the combustion chamber size is of the factory LB9 cylinder heads, if anybody knows, and then if we can do a subtraction from the 56cc, we could figure out what the change is, and we can and we know what the static, stock, or rated compression of that is. We can do an estimate. Is a Quadrajet E4ME carb with a distributor worth grabbing for 300? I don't know. Is that the electronic one? If it's a feedback carburetor, I wouldn't get it because you're not going to have the computer to run it. Did you see the Steve Morse video with the Torque Storm guys? I haven't. I've been meaning to call Steve about some other stuff. Sykes, we did talk about Calvin's dad crashing this morning. I haven't heard from them, so I don't know how he is. People have told me that he's okay, although he's banged up pretty bad. Yeah, Wallace Racing does have lots of calculators. It's a good place to go. You could spend hours there doing stuff. I put a slightly too big of a cam, my 440 from where I want my power. Can I advance it 4 degrees? That may not change it enough. I doubt that it's going to shift where the thing makes power dramatically, a 4-degree change. Are two 450 horsepower turbos less efficient than one 900 horsepower turbo? They should theoretically be the same. If that's the absolute flow rate, then it should be the same. And the spool rate is going to depend some also on the hot side of that equation. Let's see. Butler does do good Pontiac stuff. Some folks did a video on adding a GT45 turbo to a 97 Pontiac transport van with a V6 motor. They could not destroy the motor no matter what they did to it. That's not accurate. I could put too much timing in NA and it would definitely destroy the motor. And you put too much timing in any motor, especially with boost, and it will definitely destroy the motor. So they weren't trying hard enough. It's better that they didn't destroy it. It means that they had their tune correct. Oh yeah, that's right, Oliver. We were talking about running a feedback quadrijet with a small signal generator to run the solenoid. That would be cool if we were able to do that. I'd love to be able to cruise down the road with a quadrijet and an air fuel meter and read it. And then I'd really want to do it old school and run one of those BZ meters with the LEDs on it and just run down the road and have the thing be like cruising at 15 to 1 or something. I love these live feeds. You always answer questions if I can, unlike most YouTubers. I would think that it would behoove them to answer questions. Putting another fuel pump in, even if you have to modify it, is not a big deal. I wonder what the rattle is. Let's see. What are you doing down here? What are you guys doing? Small earthquake. Any chance a micro squirt could control electronic carburetor? I don't know. It might be. We'd have to look and see. Oliver was going to look and see what the signal was. Got one of those bar graph LED meters somewhere in the stash of Volvo parts. I used one on my Mustang, and it was surprisingly, even though it was, I think we were running a narrow band meter with that. I think it was a 1-wire meter, but it was surprisingly like accurate because we compared it to, we borrowed the guys from FOF's where I did engine testing down there in Huntington Beach. They did marine motors, and I borrowed they let me put their Hariba in my car and drive around, and we compared it to what the readings were on the BZ meter, and because the Hariba was using obviously a 5-wire sensor, and I was surprised at how accurate it was. Do you think a turbo or a nitrous system producing 200 extra horsepower has any difference on the longevity of my mostly stock solid small block Chevy? Yes, I do. It will definitely not be the same as if you didn't have it. But are you trying to get another 200,000 or 300,000 miles out of that small block? I would pick a turbo over the nitrous for longevity if I was doing it. Could also be a rallying PCV valve. Might be. Trying to see what else could be rattling here. I don't know. Supercharger twin turbo, which would you go for? Lucky for you, I have data on all that. You can look at superchargers and turbos and see which power curve you want. How's that? Did that do anything? The mic is isolated. It's on rubber supports. How about this? That's just the camera. 2 more minutes. We're going to get rid of our poll. 84% saying no, 16% saying yes. They have tried different turbos. Try tapping the mic. Hot shots. Man, I got a few cards from people that I need to get back to. Aeromotive, Race Tech. Race Tech actually, I think, are the guys that wanted to Performance Designs. There they are. Airflow Research. Hemmings, Total Seal piston rings. Precision, definitely want to get back to Reggie. The Race Tech guys have drop-in pistons that are the same weight, so we don't have to even rebalance it, which I thought was cool. Bulletproof Automotive. Tom from Liveroys. Tom's a good guy. Vortec. Molly. Maybe it's Molly. I have to see. I will have to see. I didn't do anything. I was just looking at cards. I understand the rising boost curve works for some applications, but actually, I absolutely hate giving up the parasitic loss of driving the blower. It is, that's a thing. How long did the LS truck cam shootout swap take you? What do you mean? How long did it take to do each cam swap? Do you think you could put a tune port intake that uses 2 throttle bodies on a TBI 5.7 and make it work? How are you going to control the 2 throttle bodies? Liver noise, I need to see about a tuner for your EcoBoost. Saw 2000 GMC. Cords, you've done turbo swaps, right? Probably a dumb question. There's no dumb questions. Flipping my LS4 fuel rail so that the feed is on the driver's side will be fine. Will the fuel rail actually still work on the intake manifold if you do that? Check and make sure that that's the case. It's possible to sleeve an LV3 4.3 liter V6 to a 4030 bore. Yeah, does somebody have sleeves for that motor? Is Darton or somebody have that? I want to turbo my Vortec 5.3. What mod should I start with? Most people put cam and springs in it first, and then you're going to have to do, if you do a turbo, you're going to have to select your turbo, your intercooler, obviously all your piping and stuff, injectors, fuel pump. Ever thought about running ITBs on an LS versus a regular manifold for a video? I've already done that. I've run cross rams on them and downdraft throttle bodies on an LS. Cords, how did you control the VNT turbo stuff? So, Admiral, you want to put a V10 in a Colorado? Did they also have 6 cylinders in those, inline 6 cylinders? Because obviously, if an inline 6 cylinder should fit, a V10 should fit, or a V12. Oh, stock electronics. Okay. I didn't know if you put one of those turbos on one of the earlier cars. And on that note, it is time to go. I've been here too late. I got here late. That's why I stayed, because I got here late. Thank you guys all for showing up. I will see you all tomorrow.